So I'm open to Module 8 in Week 4. This is the second module for the week, and we will be covering Chapter 9, which is Using Health Services. Got your to-do list for the week, and as you can see, it's a pretty packed chapter. There are no physiological modules that go along with this chapter, just Chapter 9 alone. So let's unpack this a little bit. We're going to start with looking at explaining the role of various levels of healthcare professionals, sort of like the who's who in healthcare. We hear a lot of names and want to just make sure that you understand credentials, so for example, the difference between a PA and a doctor, a psychiatric nurse, a nurse practitioner. So we'll kind of cover most of those bases. And we'll also look at the state of medical care today in the U.S. How are people getting care compared to 50 years ago, and what is the quality of that care, pros and cons, as well as comparing and contrasting the U.S. healthcare system with those of other countries. Then we'll start taking a look at how people seek help for their health. When do they seek help? How do they seek help? And so that sort of brings into play a lot of demographic and individual factors that we'll be taking a look at. We'll also explain the role of an individual's perception of their symptoms or of their illness. So a person may be ill, but it's really how they perceive their illness that affects what they do about it, i.e. whether or not they seek care or how they seek care. We're all sort of culturally taught different things when it comes to responding to sickness or responding to illness. So what factors dictate how our symptoms are perceived? That's pretty much what we'll be looking at. Being familiar with how people typically respond to their symptoms. How does the average person respond to illness symptoms, and then how might they interpret those symptoms? What is the patient's first line of defense in health? And what are common reasons for seeking medical care? So, how likely is a person to get help for something? And that really has to do with what the something is. And again, that's intertwined with culture and where we live, even just subcultures. So America as a larger culture might have sort of norms for when we seek care, but then it might hinge upon how your family views medical care, or it might hinge upon how educated you are in doing so. So we'll explain some of that in terms of the demographics and who's more likely to seek care and what the sociocultural factors are that dictate people's healthcare usage. One thing that we typically look at as well is delay in using health services. Where is the holdup? So if you notice something is wrong, why is there a delay in actually seeking help for what you notice in your symptoms? Everybody is different, but there are definitely some commonalities that we can deduce and start to unpack to try to understand the mind and the reasoning behind health service delay. And what we'll do to sort of try to understand some of that is use some of the most popular theories that exist in explaining health behavior and health behavior change. One of those being the health belief model, which explains people's delay in seeking help when they have health crisis or symptoms. We'll also be taking a look at complementary, alternative, and integrative medicine, otherwise known as CAME, and we'll understand how it differs from Western medicine or modern American medicine and how it can be used. So getting familiar with the various modalities of CAME and the types of illnesses and diseases people are using it for to treat. And what are people's reasons for using it? Why do people turn to alternative or complementary medicine as opposed to Western medicine? What are some of the existing perceptions people have of its use? Then we'll move into talking a little bit more about the patient-provider relationship. So doctors and patients, understanding what patients' preferences are in their relationships with their practitioners. How do patients want to be approached? What kinds of information are they looking for when they go in for a visit? Do they want a lot of information? Do they want, to be told what to do? Do they want more say? What does that look like today? So we're really going to get into comparing and contrasting some different approaches that are taken by practitioners and their patients, such as a doctor-centered approach or a patient-centered interaction style, which is they're really just different styles of communication that providers have with their patients. And this is where we'll really start getting into some of the meat of understanding medical jargon, how it's used, why it is and is not helpful to the physician-patient relationship. We'll kind of turn things a little bit, looking at some patient factors that can get in the way of practitioners actually doing their jobs, like how might a patient stop a doctor from doing their job effectively, what might get in the way, and some methods for improving physician-patient communication. It is a huge database of literature looking at the ways in which doctors and patients communicate and how can we make it better. And why is this such a big issue? Because many, many people have intricate relationships with their medical practitioners. I mean, the majority of people in the U.S. Have illness, and a lot of them have or have the need for ongoing care. And when you have ongoing care, that person becomes a very important person in your life. So your doctor is someone who you are giving intimate details of your life to try to help you. So we'll take a look at adherence and non-adherence to certain regimens and drug treatments and how that all operates, as well as understanding how we even assess adherence. How do we know how well a patient adheres to a regimen, whether or not they follow instructions or do what they're supposed to do? How would we even measure that? And what might be people's reasons for not adhering? I mean, do they just not want to get better? Do they not care? It's really not that simple, but we'll kind of run the gamut of looking at what those reasons might be and how demographic factors play a big role in patient adherence, ending with ways in which research has looked at how we can improve patient adherence. How can we help patients to better adhere to their regimens? Whether you're a cardiac patient or a diabetic patient or a cancer patient, and you're on a regimen that's maybe grueling and requires a lot out of you, how can you best stick to that? So that wraps up the chapter. Here are your lecture slides. You have a video assignment also with this module, and it is on alternative medicine, because I know that is a newer concept that many of you are not familiar with. So this video looks at all the various forms of alternative medicine and how they're being used today to treat illness. So again, just like the last module, here are the questions that go along with the video, so you'll want to maybe print those out or type them out on the computer as you're watching along with the video. And when you're ready to submit that worksheet, you're just going to go ahead and click on the assignment link to do that. It's also due on the 4th. Your module discussion 8 for the longevity project has to do with marriage. How happy is your marriage? And I realize that, well, actually maybe a couple of you might be married, but most of you are not. So feel free to pick a parent or someone that you know, maybe an older sibling who's married, and maybe give the assessment to them. Give them the questionnaire. And that might be interesting. It might also be a fun way to pull them into what you're learning. So you can go ahead and score them and interpret that score. And then when you're ready to do so, you can answer these questions about what the Longevity Project found about being married. What about being married promotes health? What are some gender differences that we notice in marriage and longevity? And looking at the various groups that the term and data studied across time, which really give us clues as to how we can best use our relationships to promote health and longevity. So those are the questions that go along with the Longevity Project reading for this Module 8 discussion. Don't forget to integrate in the main chapter, Chapter 9. There might be some stuff here that relates to what you read here. And so you want to be able to use that as support anytime that you can in your writing. And that will conclude Module 8.